Okay.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Resilient Nonprofits, our conversation series from Intersector Partners L3C. I'm excited today to be joined by Julie Riskin, who's the Executive Director of the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition. Julie and I have known each other for several years now since she was a participant, CCDC was a participant in the Colorado Nonprofit Social Enterprise Exchange, where they launched a really exciting social enterprise that we'll touch on a little bit today. Julie's been the executive director at CCDC for over 25 years, so has seen a lot of ups and downs, a lot of recessions and different crisis situations, and had to make a lot of changes along the way, I'm sure. But as we all know, this global pandemic has been something that none of us have experienced before. So I'm excited to hear what Julie has been doing and how she's keeping the organization going and thriving. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you.
Glad to have you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Anything else you want to share by way of introduction about you?
No, just the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition is a statewide disability rights organization with a mission to advocate for social justice on behalf of people with all types of disabilities, and that's what cross disability means.
Okay, thanks. So what does that mean? What kind of work do you do? What programs and services do you offer?
So we're a social justice organization. So I always talk about our work kind of in the context of the three branches of government. So we do a lot of systems advocacy, and that obviously starts at the legislative level. We monitor bills, we pass bills, we fight against bills. But that's kind of the easy part. Once a bill gets passed, it has to be implemented, and then the program that you develop has to be managed, or sometimes altered or changed, or the intent needs to be honored. And that's kind of an ongoing commitment working with the executive branch. The way we figure out, and so we have a cadre of advocates that get trained, and they serve on various boards or committees. We have a lobbying team, like for example, our lobbying team they're all volunteers, and they've listened to every single meeting of the Joint Budget Committee over the past several weeks, providing detailed reports to other members of the team. So when the next team comes on, they know kind of what the discussion has been. And then we can weigh in on kind of what issues we feel, our thoughts on those. In terms of, we also do individual advocacy, so people can call us when they're having problems with different systems, and those problems that we get determine what our priorities are going to be for systems fixes. We are a membership organization. Our membership is free, and it's open to anyone that supports our mission. And so again, the individual advocacy work is mostly like at the executive branch and sometimes at the county level. And that's anything from giving someone advice to helping them get a lawyer elsewhere, to filing appeals, going with them to meetings, all different stuff like that. And then we have the judicial branch, and we have two legal programs. One is a civil rights legal program, and that program, we litigate enforcement of the Americans with Disabilities Act and other disability rights laws like the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act, the Fair Housing Amendments Act. And we have two attorneys and a paralegal in that program, and we've been doing that for a long time. The most recent case we filed was when I first heard about this case, I said to my attorney, I said, is this like a joke? Like, is this actually happening? But we had to sue a plasma bank because they were refusing to allow people with disabilities to donate plasma in a time of need.
On what basis?
It was absolutely ridiculous. So for example, one plaintiff uses a wheelchair and he can't stand, and they said, well, if we can't weigh you, so you would have to go to a doctor's office that has an accessible scale the exact same day and then come over here. Another person just needed a step stool to get onto the exam table, and they said they couldn't do that. They refused someone with mental illness, and they actually put this in writing, saying that they didn't know that the person wouldn't think that the needle to get the plasma was an alien and attack the staff or something like that. really ridiculous stuff. So that's some of the work that our civil rights legal program does. We also have a program that you're familiar with, which is a social enterprise, which is our other legal program, which is called Probate Power, and that's a probate law program. They do wills for anyone, but for people with disabilities, they'll do wills, special needs trusts, ABLE accounts, any kind of advanced planning, like power of attorney documents, all of those kinds of things. We also do uncontested guardianships. And then we also do a lot of just like kind of community education, making sure our community is informed, knows what's going on. And then we, on a contract basis, we'll support other nonprofits to help them learn how to act from a member-centered, resident-centered, client-centered place. And we also will manage client advisory councils for our organizations, as well as do trainings on both disability, cultural competency, legal obligations, et cetera, for any kind of provider.
Wow, that is a lot that you all are doing. Is the Community Advisory Board work that you do with other nonprofits, is that related to if they have a advisory board of people with disabilities or advisory board of any group of people that they seek to engage?
It could be anything. Yeah, anything. It's about helping people learn how to, so sometimes it's like our largest main client there is Rocky Mountain Health Plans, and they are obligated under their contract to do a client advisory council for their big Medicaid project, and that's on the West Slope in Larimer County. And they wanted to do it anyway. I mean, they're not doing it just because they have to, but they thought it was more appropriate to have an advocacy organization manage it than to have it be managed by them as a health plan. So we've been doing that for them since the Accountable Care Project began. And we run 4 committees for them, 2 on Larimer County and 2 on the West Slope.
Well, I have always been so impressed with all of the work that you do, the breadth of the work that you do at the Cross Disability Coalition. Did you bring most of those programs to be? I know you were a consultant before coming to CCDC. So is that kind of how your mind works, that you're thinking about what are the challenges and how can we offer programs or services to respond to them?
Not kind of, but really most of the stuff that we do has come to us through our members. That's really is like needs arise. We have a pretty robust member involvement process where, of ways for people to be involved, and, they generally become advocates, then get involved in our planning process. And that's kind of how new programs or things bubble up. So the consultant stuff was actually people coming to us because they saw that we were able to do it, to involve people in a meaningful way and asking us for help on how to do it. So it wasn't like we thought to go out and offer it initially.
Okay, great. So a lot of what you described are things that you could probably do from an office, but some of it are things that you do in person as well. How has COVID changed the way that you're offering programs and services? I mean, instantly you probably sent your team home. You have a fairly large staff at this point. How did that all unfold, and how have things changed?
So it's interesting. So we've had some staff that have always worked from home. And so for them, it was nothing different. But then for the group of us that worked in the office, it was an adjustment. So there were a few that really, really, really hated it. Others that got used to it, but, out of when we started the kind of soft reopening a couple weeks ago, we had actually 2 people who said that they wanted to stay home, that they wanted to, they found that they liked working at home better. They didn't really feel like they needed an office. And that's kind of good because it relieves a little bit of space pressure that we have. I mean, we're still not totally back. A lot of us are still working at home, but we have some people in the office. We're keeping, of course, to the 50% mandate that Denver has. So that, so that does kind of limit how many people can be in the office. And then I think the hardest thing is not being able to do in-person meetings. That's difficult right now, but until it's safer, we're not going to be doing them, or at least not with large groups.
Mm-hmm. How has this transition to Zoom impacted people with disabilities, people on your staff or people that you serve, these online meetings? I know that it seems like we all just flipped the switch and started doing online, but it's not entirely an accessible option for everyone.
Zoom's pretty accessible, actually.
Okay, good.
Some of the other platforms are not, but Zoom is pretty accessible. Mm-hmm. I think the people that are most impacted are people that are in rural areas with spotty internet. Mm-hmm. And that isn't many people. I mean, we have folks in rural areas that are on Zoom all the time. I think it's always harder for people who are deaf, because sign language is such a bit like a physical language that mm-hmm. even when you have a good interpreter on the screen, you know, and distractions are so much more of an issue for someone who might be trying to look at an interpreter. So I think it's a little bit harder for them, but Zoom does, you know, you can pin the interpreter so that the interpreter is always visible, and then you just have other people you don't have as many people on the camera, you just have more people turning off their cameras. But it's and then I think there's some of the older people that aren't as comfortable. My partner, who's one of them, always says that I'm generalizing and being ageist, which I probably am. But there are people that are just, you know, have worked their whole lives like face to face in person, and they're just not mm-hmm. as comfortable with electronic. And then I think there are things, I mean, I like it when everyone has the video on and you can see facial expressions. I think that's easier than a conference call where everyone's just on the phone. Mm-hmm. But in some ways it's leveled the playing field more too, because it doesn't then exclude those who can't get out.
Or who would have a 2-hour round trip on public transportation to try to right. attend a meeting in person.
Yeah.
Okay. What other impacts have happened on CCDC? How about at probate power? What's happening there?
Well, they're really busy. There's nothing like a pandemic to get people thinking about their advanced care planning and wills. So they're really busy. I think, so a couple other impacts. I mean, we had to pivot really quickly. The biggest thing that we needed to do immediately was to get accurate quality information out to our community, because there were just like some disability specific things that come up with whenever there's like with the stay-at-home order, like, you know, making sure our home care attendants were excluded, making sure people knew how to be safe when they use personal care providers and can't social distance. You know, we have a lot of our folks are part of the homeless community who, you know, again, you can't wash your hands if you don't have a sink. Mm-hmm. So making sure that people had the best information possible. And I mean, and even this past weekend, you know, when the curfew went into effect, we had to talk to the city on Saturday to say, you know, the people who are personal care attendants, there are a lot of disability buildings in downtown. They're not going to have an ID. They work for individuals. They're going to use a whole bunch of different names for what they do. Some are going to say, I'm a home care aide. Some are going to say, I'm an assistant. We need to make sure that those people are not stopped and harassed when they're going to work. So, and that they're going to be allowed to get downtown and, you know, do their job, because otherwise people aren't going to be able to get help getting to bed. Mm-hmm. So just like kind of always being around for like those types of issues. You know, and so a lot of stuff came up that we just didn't, you know, expect. And then sadly, we've seen a number of instances since this started of people wanting to kind of appropriate our issues and make an issue that was not our issue, or like make something that isn't a disability issue, try and use disability. And I'll give two examples. Mm-hmm. One is one of the RTD board members, her name's Chantel Lewis, was advocating for rear door boarding and not having fares because that limits the contact between the passenger and driver. It's just safer. Most transit districts across the country went to that. Initially, now RTD did do that eventually. Initially, RTD said, oh no, we can't do that because of the ADA, because people in wheelchairs have to be able to board the ramp on the front. Well, of course, and no one ever had suggested that they wouldn't let someone that could only board that way board. It was just saying, have most people use the rear door to keep that distance. no, again, the drivers or Director Lewis, like no one, of course, was ever suggesting that they weren't going to let wheelchair users on the bus. So that was one example. And the other, which has been much more serious even, is that people who think it's a violation of their civil liberties to have to wear a mask have been actually handing out cards to people, telling people who don't feel like wearing masks to say, oh, I have a disability, to go into businesses, refuse to wear a mask, say, I have a disability, and the ADA says that you can't make me wear a mask. The ADA does not say that. The ADA actually has a provision that talks about a direct threat, and it actually looks like they were even thinking about some kind of pandemic. But it says, like, even if you do it, there are disabilities that do prohibit you from, that might make it hard to wear a mask or impossible. Even then, the business might have to accommodate you in some other way, like deliver or bring it to the door, bring it to the curb or whatever, but they do not have to let you in, and we encourage them not to, because you're not wearing a mask to protect yourself, you're wearing a mask to protect others, and the only way you can kind of keep the community safe is if people wear masks. And that's why cities like, most cities of any size have mask requirements for when you're out in public.
Boy, those are two really interesting examples of things I would have never thought of. Wow. How about anything that's been a positive change in the way that things have happened in COVID for people with disabilities? I was thinking about things like more restaurants have figured out delivery. Are there other things that have had unintended positive consequences?
Yeah, Medicaid figured out telehealth real fast.
Real fast.
Most of our people love it. Like, they just love it. It's great. A lot of, some of the silly rules got waived. Like, normally you have to have a doctor fit, like, even if you have a permanent disability and it's the exact same thing every year, you have to have a doctor sign the same pieces of paper every year, and they waive that. You have to have a case manager show up at your house and ask you a bunch of questions that, again, are the same thing every year. They waive that. You just have to have a short phone call now. So some of those things have been really nice. Now obviously as soon as the public health emergency is over, those things are going to end, but we're hoping we can, we've been talking to the state and looking at how do we take the things that we see now can work and keep them going. We have had a lot of collaboration, really positive, with our state Medicaid agency and our state public health department, and that's been really, really positive. That's been really good partnership. Doesn't mean that we don't push them on stuff, because we probably always will. That's our job.
That's
but
right.
They've been, we've, like with our state Medicaid agency, we've been having weekly meetings. Same thing with the Lieutenant Governor's office. The public health department has been very, very responsive. So that's been really nice to have that, to have them really want our involvement and then listen. That's been great.
That's wonderful. I'm glad to hear it. I know that there have a lot of people trying to get their ear about a lot of different topics. Everybody has important things to say. Small business, nonprofits, people with disabilities, people living with HIV. Everybody has everything that's happened has affected people in such different ways that I also feel like they've been pretty responsive to listening to.
Yeah. I think the other thing that's been interesting that I've been talking about a lot is this is a time and a place where, I've been calling on our community really to lead, because we have a lot of people in our community that have done this before. We have a lot of people in our community that have gone from being okay to being in poverty overnight. We have a lot of people that have had to spend months, if not more than a year, inside because of, like, if you have a bed sore, you've got to lie in bed for like 3 months. So we have people who, like, they acquire a disability and, like, by the, when it's 6 months till their house is made accessible. So we have people who know how to do this and can give tips. And so we've been, telling people, like, ask people with disabilities how you do this, how you deal with, like, your whole life changing overnight, because a lot of us, know how to do this. So that's been kind of a different place for us to be in.
That's really smart advice, and I hope that people watching this conversation will think about doing that for sure. That actually is a great segue into my next question, which is about resiliency. It sounds like the organization has been fairly resilient through all of this. What do you think it is that has made the Cross Disability Coalition be resilient?
Without a question, the staff and the board. I mean, without a question. I mean, the staff at CCDC, without exception, are people that when something happens, they say, you know, they either come up with ideas and say, what do you think about this? Can we implement this? Or what can I do? And do it. And like the first few weeks, you know, when we had to like, you know, kind of build and populate a website and, you know, get it translated and do all this stuff, like, you know, immediately, you know, everyone just worked nonstop till it got done. No one complained. No one said, you know, this is too much or anything. You know, everyone just did what had to be done because, you know, we're all part of the community that we serve. So I think, you know, like stopping or failing just isn't an option. And that doesn't mean that we don't make mistakes along the way. Of course we do. And I'm really lucky that I have this, you know, really great board of directors that is, they hold, you know, they absolutely hold me accountable as the director, but they're also supportive. I can go to them with different, you know, they're different members have different expertise. So I can go to them for different things. And they're responsive and, you know, they give me really great feedback and advice. And, you know, they have their hands on the pulse of the community too. So, it's that kind of team that makes us able to be resilient.
Is there anything that you do in hiring or your hiring practices or what you look for when you're hiring somebody that maybe helps you identify somebody who is going to slide into that role well and just be able to flip the switch and go?
Two things. One is whenever possible, I try and hire people that are that have been volunteers with the organization first, so I know them. So we have I think the most recent permanent hire. Oh no, she is the second most recent, but I'm so bad with time. But anyway, our deputy director, it's a new position, you know, relatively new. And her name's Shannon, and she started off as a volunteer advocate, and then we hired her on a couple different contracts to do stuff, and she really has a knack for kind of management. Her thinking is very different from mine, which is what I wanted, because she's really good on the management side and that type of organization, which I can do when I have to, but that's not where my mind goes naturally. So I got to see her work, got to see how she, you know, kind of, you know, fit in. Has a kid with a significant disability, so she gets it, you know, so she lives it like the rest of us. And so when the position was you know, I actually talked to her specifically when I wanted to create the position and asked, you know, we kind of talked it through, and you know, and so that was like a known quantity. And then, but then we also there's also a book that I read years ago called Hiring for Attitude. And it's a really good book, and it's been my Bible. And what they do is they tell you to look at what are the qualities of your best employees, like not so much like what they can do, but like who they are as people. So not the fact that they have a law degree or that, you know, like our IT guy, it's not like, yeah, he can fix computers, but what is it about who he is as a person that works? Like write that down, then kind of write about like employees that maybe haven't worked out. What is it about them that you didn't want? You know, if you had someone who was like, you know, I don't know, like didn't, you know, like they weren't there for the mission of the organization or something like that, then, you know, what behaviors did you see that indicated that? And so you kind of do that. And then they talk about, you know, they give you some guidelines for how you ask questions and how to ask questions in a way so that you're not telling the person ahead of time what answer you want to hear. And then there's just the obvious things like, did they do any research about you? You know, when they come for an interview, did they do research? The other thing I do is I always bring in, for an important hire, I bring in other people. So it's never just me, because I never know, any one person, I mean, we all have biases. So am I going to be like, oh, I'm so frantic to get this position filled that I'm going to overlook something? And then, learning to take good advice. When we hired Chris Brock, who's the director of Probate Power, we, through your program, actually got connected with an investor, and he was a very successful businessman. And he said to us, it's about the jockey, not the horse. And he said, you've got to get this particular business is going to rise and fall with the managing attorney, the person that's going to run this. So you've got to get the absolute right person. And, it's like pornography. You'll know it when you see it. And we had interviewed some people, and, there was a kind of a timeline with the program, and we weren't going to make it. We weren't going to make that timeline, but we'd interviewed some people and they were qualified. But we didn't feel it. We just didn't feel it. Then we met Chris, and all of us, and I think we had three different people do 3 different interviews, and we were all like, oh my God, he's the person. Well, he is finishing a clerkship for a judge, and that didn't end till like Labor Day, and this was like June. So we made a decision that we were going to postpone doing this for several months, because we felt like he was the right person, and we were right. We were absolutely right to do that.
Oh, I love it.
Because he's been fantastic. And I think, again, the other people were, again, we had several other choices of people who were qualified. But especially when if you're starting a social enterprise, it's got to be more than, like, just qualified isn't enough. It's got to be your passion. And it's got to be something that you're willing to put your whole self into.
Absolutely. When did you launch Probate Power? Was that 2017?
It was, I think we hired him in 16, in the fall of 16, and we launched it in 17. Like, we opened the doors in 2017.
Wow, I can't believe how fast time is flying by.
I know.
It's not really a new thing for you anymore.
No, it isn't. And I just kind of gave him authority to hire. He hired an intern. We had an intern last summer, and we're actually hiring an intern this summer, because he's right at the point where it's more work than he can do. We had a joke saying, first year break even, second year I want a corporate jet. So we're not at the corporate jet, but we have been profitable. We've almost paid back we got I know you think I'm supposed to know all these terms that we learned in your class, but we got a recoverable grant and some kind of loan that was really favorable to start us up, and we've paid like 75% of that back already. We've got a little more, and our investors have been really kind and saying, like, we could set the schedule and all of that. I got interviewed recently on like nonprofit loans and what made you take them versus not, and one of the things I said is the ability to pay back on our schedule is really important. I mean, to be honest, if we didn't have that right now, I would be a little bit freaked out. But knowing that if we can't make any more payments this year, and I don't know that we can't, but if we can't, that won't be a big deal, that we can finish it when we're, because obviously, like all nonprofits, it's going to be a challenging year. But like knowing that we have that freedom and that they're not going to, think that we're slouches or anything, is really, really helpful.
Well, an observation that I have about that process, and you in particular, is that you really worked hard to build relationships with your funders, that it wasn't submit a proposal or submit a business plan and they write you a check, but you've built these strong relationships so that you know each other, and they are going to be more likely in that instance to be comfortable saying, yes, we can give you wiggle room because we know you and we know that you're going to come through on the back end.
Yeah, and they've been great. They've served on our program advisory committee, and again, it's been really helpful to get that kind of advice, from people outside of our community.
Well, I didn't tell you I would ask you this question, but I'm curious, as I've been talking to more nonprofit leaders, how are you? This is a lot that we've been through in the last several months. How are you holding up as a leader of an organization? Have you taken any time off? Are you planning to?
Well, my scheduled vacation to Vegas was last week, so
oh no,
that didn't happen. But I'm okay. It is hard. It's a lot, but it's a lot harder on a lot of the people that are directly impacted. I mean, yeah, it's stressful. It's hard. I also, I have a son who's a first responder, and my kids are adults. They're both essential workers. One's a first responder. He's a medical helicopter pilot. But I don't have to worry every day that he's going to be shot. I mean, I worry about him, but he's an excellent pilot. I mean, I know it's a dangerous occupation, but I don't have to worry every time he walks out the door. So I don't have that level of stress. Unlike my colleagues who are Black and brown, my parents are safe and healthy. Their parents who are just as old aren't. So I think like the stress that some of us who hold a little more, have some of that privilege is so much less than what so many other folks are dealing with. I also, I'm grateful that I'm an empty nester doing this. Some of my staff have kids at home. Two of my staff have kids. It's really hard. So it's like fairly easy. That doesn't mean I don't sometimes get, a little stressed out. It was either last week or the week before, I had a couple meetings where I don't think I was my best self. I was a little hostile with the slowness of some situations, some bureaucratic situations. And I realized I needed to like sign off for the night and not send any emails. But I think that's just kind of what we all need to do. But like, yeah, it's stressful, but there's so much, I heard from my predecessor, the person who founded our organization and was the founding director. She lived in India for many years, and I talked to her last week, and she was telling me about a colleague of hers in India, where not only are they dealing with COVID, but then they're dealing with like hurricanes and now locusts. And this person who has post-polio has been on a roof in a tin shack since March 17th. And it's 110 degrees at all times. And now they're locusts. I mean, I can't imagine that kind of stress. I can't imagine being able to like keep up with that. So it's kind of that kind of resiliency, like real resiliency is what, when I feel like it's too much is what I need to think about.
Thank you for that perspective. I really appreciate it. I think it's been easy for me to get bogged down. The world feels very heavy right now. And I think that's a great way to reframe and then to think about what I can do to roll up my sleeves and get to work.
Right. I mean, and the world is really heavy right now, and there's really awful things going on. So I think it's okay to feel bad about that because it is bad stuff. And I don't think there's anything wrong with people feeling like what happened to Washington, D.C. yesterday is horrifying. It's terrifying. It's heartbreaking. When, like the National Guard the military is being called on citizens peacefully protesting. I have an employee who's a refugee, and we had his, quarterly evaluation today. And I just said, I just have to ask you, because you've seen this firsthand and I haven't, is this what it looks like when societies break down? Is this what it looks like? And he said, yeah, kind of it is. I mean, he's seen a lot worse than this, but like, we keep saying it could get a lot worse, and that, at some point, what are we going to do about it? So it's very scary, because again, the people that most of us in the nonprofit sector serve are the ones who are going to get hit first, first and hardest. And I think who are being hit first and hardest.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the great things about the sector is that we all there's so much that we can do and to engage. And so on that note, on a positive closing note for our chat today, what can people do to support the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition? How can they get involved? How can they contribute? How can they
So,
purchase services if they need them?
so the first thing that they can do is they can join as a member. It's on our website, which is CCDC, like cat, dog, cat, online, all lowercase, all one word, .org. Membership is free. So the more members we have, the better it is. You can sign up to either get notified on get our email alerts out either on certain topics or on nothing. If you don't want to get more emails, that's okay. Or if you want to hear every time we have something to say, that's okay too. You'll get a checklist and you check the topics you care about. And then follow us on social media, on Facebook or Twitter, and respond. You can, again, with social media, you can respond if what we're asking you to respond to resonates with your values. You can ignore us if it doesn't. Those are some like really quick and easy things. If someone does have probate needs, our social enterprise is Probate Power, and you can get that from our website. If you need to redo your will, if you're looking at even stuff like we do have online, it is you can do it yourself for free, but if you would rather have an attorney do it, you can do your advanced planning documents. That's something everyone should do. It's not just people with health conditions or disabilities. Anyone that could find themselves in a situation where you can't speak for yourself, and when you're on a ventilator, you can't speak for yourself. So everyone should have a plan of who do you want to speak for you if you can't speak for yourself. And again, we have stuff on our website, but if you want the guidance of an attorney, Chris can help you with that, or you can just take our materials and do it yourself, but do it. The other thing is make sure you filled out your census. I'm sure you're hearing that from nonprofits. That is going to affect how much money Colorado gets, which affects all of us. And of course, make sure that you're registered to vote. We do, like every nonprofit, are happy to take financial donations. If you're a nonprofit that wants to do more with disability cultural competency, or not just a nonprofit, a business, a government, anyone, we can work with you on, on a fee for service, and if you want to get more involved, if you want to be more client-centered or resident-centered, we can help you with that. If you're in the 7-county metro area, you might qualify for a Denver Foundation Technical Assistance Grant to help you pay for that. And there's a small group of people in that group, but there's several other people that coach on that. So there's actually a list of people you could choose from through the Denver Foundation. If you're, again, that is limited to the 7-county area, but so those are things you can do. We will have an advocacy class coming up in the fall. I would bet it's probably going to be remote only. Our first class was offered both ways, and then about 3/4 of the way through, we went to remote only. If it's safe to do it in person, we'll offer that option, but we just don't know yet. You can sign up for that on our website. We urge people to get involved. We have lots of volunteer opportunities, particularly with policy, but also we're still trying to figure out individual advocacy and how to onboard a new volunteer with the social distancing requirements. We're not accepting any visitors in our office, but we will be at some point. And so I know we have staff that are eager to welcome and support new volunteers. So, but there's a lot people can do from home. Whatever your disability interest is, we probably have a committee or something that we're working on, or at least we do or if we don't, we'll know another nonprofit that does. So for example, we have not done much with special education, which is a failure, but we know other organizations like most of the ARC chapters and Advocacy Denver that do a great job with that. So we might refer you there if that's what you wanted to do. But we work really closely with all the other disability orgs. So if we're not the right fit, we can find it for people. And then I think the other thing that we'd ask people to do if they want to help is to just kind of look at things through an equity lens in general. It's not all about disability. I mean, we're a minority that anyone can join, and people of color have a higher rate of disability than white people. But even when disability isn't an issue, we need to all be looking at things with an equity lens and a social justice lens, and looking at what can we all do to create a culture of, not just diversity, but equity, inclusion, and belonging as well. And I think that's something that everyone can do, and you can do it with an organization or you can do it on your own. It's not, that's just something that everyone can do, because we do need to make some changes in our society. And I think that, and I don't think you have to be you don't have to be on one or the other side of the aisle. I think that's something that everyone can work on, and we can all work on together. You don't have to have any kind of ideology or anything like that to do this work.
Thank you, Julie. Those are really great ideas. And I love that there are simple, easy things like becoming a member, taking some advocacy action, or getting more involved if you want to. Is the best place for people to donate also at the website at ccdc.org?
ccdconline.org. Yes.
Online.org.
There's,
okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, thank you. I'm so appreciative of you opening up give us a peek behind the curtain of what's been happening at the organization and how you're managing through all of this with your great team. I know it'll mean a lot to people to be able to hear your insights and wisdom. So thank you so much, Julie. It's also really just nice to catch up.
Yeah. Thanks for thinking of us.
And we'll talk soon. Okay.
All right.
Take care.